What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are going to continue our coverage over the Mutant Massacre. Now, we do pick up with 3 more chapters. Now, I do want to tell you guys, the next 2 chapters we're going to cover in this video are going to be non-X-Men title books. So, for example, the first chapter is going to be a Power Pack book, and the next one is going to be another Thor chapter. And then we jump back into X-Men to see Sabertooth fight against Wolverine for the first time. But when it comes to the Mutant Massacre, you have to remember that this was the first X-Men crossover ever done in X-Men comics, with all the X-Men titles plus some other titles as well. And when it came to the Mutant Massacre, the whole point of the storyline was that you had a new team known as the Marauders go into the tunnels, the sewers that belong to the Morlocks, and begin to kill off Morlocks left and right. Now remember, Morlocks were a group of mutants who lived in the sewers because of how they look. When it comes to being a mutant, most mutants, when their X gene is activated, they only gain powers and that is it. But in some cases, some mutants, their bodies actually change their body appearance. And so when it came to the Morlocks, they realized that they would be unable to live on the surface level because of the way they look. They'll be hated on and attacked non-stop. And so they went to live in the sewers as a whole group. Either way, when it comes to the Marauders, they are another group of mutants that came into the tunnels of the Morlocks to kill them off, and we have no idea why yet. Now, like I said earlier, the first chapter we're going to cover today is going to be a Power Pack chapter. Now, before I dive into today's video, I do want to mention, if you want to go back and watch the other videos to get caught up on what the whole event is all about, I will put a link down below to a playlist, but also previous videos to kind of help you get a better understanding of what's happening so far in the Mutant Massacre. Now, the first chapter for today's video comes out of Power Pack number 27. Now, when it comes to Power Pack, they were a group of children that were given powers by an alien. This alien was going to die, and so it had decided to pass on its powers to these 4 children. Now, when it comes to the children's parents, they do have some concerns about the idea of their kids having powers and being heroes, but at the same time, they're kind of okay with it. Now, around this point in time, Franklin Richards, the son of Reed and Susan from the Fantastic Four, was also living with the Power Pack as well, while the Fantastic Four were missing on one of their many adventures. Either way, he's now technically part of the Power Pack. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to explain every single character of the Power Pack because, unfortunately, it'll take a lot of time, and honestly, they're not that important when it comes to the overall story of the Mutant Massacre. Now, the way you have the Power Pack get involved in the actual event is all because of Franklin Richards. When you have the children go to sleep for, the night, well, Franklin begins to dream about what is currently happening in the tunnels of the Morlocks. Of course, the Marauders going around and killing off mutants left and right. Now, here's the thing though, because when it comes to Franklin Richards, even though he is dreaming about that, it's actually happening. And so he is able to see what is currently happening in the sewers, but he's also able to project images in the middle of the room to show the Power Pack what he is currently dreaming, but in reality, what he is seeing right now down in the sewers. Now, one of the things he does project is Leech. Leech is a young Morlock in the tunnels who has the ability to cancel out other people's powers. Either way, you have Franklin right now projecting an image of Leech, who's currently holding his dear friend Caliban, who was seriously injured in a previous chapter. And so once you have all the members of the Power Pack come into the room and see what Franklin is projecting while he is still asleep, they realize their good friend Leech could most likely be in trouble. And so they wake up Franklin and they decide it's time for a another adventure and go down there to save their friend, but to also stop the bad guys. But they have no idea that they're about to get into the middle of one heck of an ugly event. And so, as soon as you have the power pack get into the tunnels of the Morlocks, well, they realize that they had just stepped into a massacre. They see dead bodies everywhere. Now, while you have our heroes continue on to hopefully find Leech, well, they run into Sabertooth. Now, Sabertooth is the perfect example of what the Marauders were truly like around this point in time. And what I mean by that is the Marauders were killing off anybody who was in their path. They were not just killing off men and women, they were also killing off children as well. If you were a Morlock in the tunnels, you were going to die by their hands. If you were just some random person that had walked into the sewers, you're going to die by their hands. And so when it comes to Sabertooth, when he finds the power pack, he doesn't care if they're Morlocks or not. They're in the sewers and they have to die. Now, luckily for our heroes, they were able to use their powers to get away from Sabertooth. But on top of that, there's something else I have to mention. When it came to the power pack around this point in time, they have their powers change over to each other. So different members have different powers they're not used to having. Either way, they were able to adapt and get lucky to get away from Sabertooth. But again, he is the most perfect example of what the Marauders are truly like, because he was going to kill off those kids if he could. Now, while you have the power pack trying to get away from Sabertooth, matter of fact, they're trying to put some distance between him and them, they do run into Wolverine. Now, they know Wolverine very well, but he's very upset about the idea of these kids being down here while this massacre is currently happening. Now, I also want to mention, look at Wolverine's outfit. It kind of shows that after you had his X-Men team leave to take survivors back over to the X-Men, that he was left here down the tunnels to hopefully find one Marauder to grab so that it'll be a hostage the X-Men can interrogate. But I'm guessing Homeboy had went through a lot of battles where his costume got ripped up a lot. Either way, you do have Wolverine tell the power pack, get the heck out of here. This is no place for children at all. You will get killed if you stay down here. Leave right now. And you have Wolverine run off, and we already know that most likely he is going to run into Sabertooth. Now, while you have the power pack continue on, they find more dead bodies. Unfortunately, they find the dead body of Anna Lee. Now, when it comes to Anna Lee, she was kind of like the mother to a lot of children in the Morlocks, especially Leech. And so now our heroes know if they do find their dear friend Leech, they have to tell him, your mother is dead. Now, we do pick up with X Factor. Now remember, X Factor was a new idea, a new team around this point in time in Marvel Comics. And when it came to X Factor, it was the original 5 X-Men coming back together to make their own team, because they felt like the new X-Men were not doing a good job when it came to making sure that Charles' dream came to life. The idea of humans and mutants living together. Also, they hated the idea of Magneto taking over the school and having Charles Xavier stepping down. And so when it came to X Factor, they want to make sure that Charles' dream does live on to the point where it could possibly succeed. Now, something else I do want to mention is Cyclops and Jean Grey. And the reason why, because we have to remember, at this point in time, Cyclops is married, but not to Jean Grey. He's married to Madeline Pryor. On top of that, they have a child together, but he left his family to come over here to make the X Factor team to hopefully make Charles Xavier dream come to life. But at the same time, it's Jean Grey, you know, she knows that Cyclops moved on and also got married because he believed that she was dead. but at the same time, it's still her kind of hoping that maybe the two of them can get back together. Either way, when we do jump back over to them, it's really them and the rest of their team bringing back more survivors of the Morlocks back over to their X Factor base. But you have Cyclops wanting to go back into the sewers to hopefully find one of their lost friends, Artie. But getting back over to Power Pack, they're still looking for their dear friend Leech. Even though Wolverine told them, get the heck out of here, they're more of, no, we came down here with a mission. We're gonna find our lost friend Leech. And so you do have the young heroes continue on. Unfortunately, they run into some more Marauders. Now again, they are also perfect examples, just like Sabertooth the show, that when it came to the Marauders, they didn't care if you were a child or an adult or old, they didn't care. You were going to die. And so when it came to the Power Pack, they realized they had no choice but to go ahead and use their powers to fight against the different members of the Marauders. Now, luckily, when it came to the Power Pack, they were able to use their powers to defeat the different members of the Marauders that they were currently facing. But after winning the battle, they find Leech. But then it gets into a very sad moment, because that is the moment where you have the Power Pack tell Leech that his mother is dead. The person that he looked at like a mother is no longer around. It's heartbreaking for Leech. This is a young boy who had lost what was his mother. Now, with that being said though, when it comes to X Factor, when they come back to the tunnels and come to where Power Pack and Leech are at, they just overheard what has happened to Leech, that his mother is dead. And that breaks Cyclops' heart a lot, because he knows what it is like to basically lose a parent. And so unfortunately, he's very upset for Leech as well. He tries his best to comfort Leech. Now, right after that, you did have Power Pack leave, but you do have Cyclops tell Iceman and Beast to take more survivors back over to their base, the X Factor base, while Jean Grey and him continue on to hopefully find Artie. And I'll explain who Artie is, just in case you may have forgot in the next chapter. But either way, it's Cyclops saying, this is why we are around. This is why X Factor is here for, to help out mutants in need. And right now, there are a lot of mutants in these tunnels who are in need for our help. So let's go down there, find Artie, and help out the other mutants we can help out. Now, the next chapter we have to cover comes from Thor number 374, where we do pick up with Thor where we left off at last time with this character, where he had found Angel severely injured and being hung against the wall by his wings. And so you have Thor trying to get Angel off the wall, but unfortunately Thor is confronted by more members of the Marauders. And so it does lead into another battle for our hero against the Marauders. Now, when it comes to their battle, Thor is struggling at first, but by the end of the section, he will be able to actually defeat them. But here's the thing though, guys, because while Thor was fighting against them and struggling, this begins the process of us realizing there's something wrong with Thor. And unfortunately, we're not going to know until the very end of this chapter. But either way, you do have Thor being able to defeat the members of the Marauders and then begin the process of taking Angel off the wall and try to take him somewhere to get some medical help. Now, we do pick up with some members of the Marauders, Sabertooth, Blockbuster, and I forgot the third character, but honestly, he's not important because the only thing he says is that Blockbuster is very upset about the idea of losing to Thor. And so right after they had lost their battle against Thor, you had these three characters meet up somewhere else, and you have Sabertooth kind of upset that he was not there with a chance to fight against Thor, but Blockbuster, his mind is somewhere else, because he is constantly thinking about the idea of how he lost to Thor. He hates the idea of losing. And so he gets back up to hopefully find Thor to have a round two. But getting back over to Thor, you have Thor currently holding on to Angel and trying to find a way out of the tunnels. Now, he is confronted by Artie. Now, this is where I'm going to remind you who Artie is, just in case you possibly forgot or you're new to the series. When it comes to Artie, he was also an X Factor trainee. He was in training to join the X Factor team. But in the earlier chapters of the series or this event, Artie left the base of X Factor to save his close friend Rusty. Now, something to remember about Artie is that he is completely mute, and the only way he is able to communicate is using his powers, where he is able to project different images as a way to show what he is talking about. Are, of course, his hands. Now, when it comes to Artie, he tells Thor that the reason why he came down here was to save his friend Rusty, but now he's also looking for other members of X Factor because he sees Angel, who's severely injured but on the back of Thor. Either way, you have Thor tell Artie to stay close with him and they'll all get out of here very soon. Except that is the moment where you have Blockbuster appear. Now, when Blockbuster does appear, this is him wanting a rematch against Thor. And like I said earlier, there's something wrong with Thor. And the reason why? Because he is struggling when it comes to fighting against Blockbuster. But on top of that, Blockbuster was able to break the arm of Thor. And that is very important for the very end of this chapter. Either way, luckily for Thor, Angel and Artie were kind of being able to distract Blockbuster long enough for Thor to give one heck of a blow to knock out Blockbuster to win the battle. But either way, Thor's arm is broken, but he says, I have to continue on. I have to get this kid, Artie, and also Angel the heck out of here before any more members of the Marauders appear and possibly kill all three of them. Now, it does not take Thor that long to be able to find other members of X Factor. Matter of fact, he finds Cyclops and Jean Grey just like that. Now, when it comes to Cyclops and Jean Grey, they realize that Angel is severely injured. And so their goal is to get Angel back over to their base to give him some medical help. Now, when it comes to Cyclops, he's also very concerned about Thor. And the reason why, because he's concerned that Thor might hear some horrible things about mutants, but also X Factor. And so he's afraid if Thor does hear that information, he might try to come after X Factor or other mutants. But you have Thor say, but I won't do that because I know who you are. We have fought alongside with one another in the earlier days of Marvel Comics. Matter of fact, how is your professor, Charles Xavier? It really shows that Thor does remember the X-Men, or at least the original X-Men, very well, and on top of that, somewhat cares for them. He even says, I don't try to have or try to use other people's opinions when it comes to judging somebody. I try to use my own opinions and try to see what I truly feel like when it comes to a particular person. But I already know who you are, Cyclops and Jean Grey and Angel. I know that you are good people. So go ahead and leave. Take little Artie with you as well, because I'm going to give the dead Morlocks a Viking funeral. I am going to burn their bodies here right now and say that this is going to be their burial site. Now, before Thor is able to give the Morlocks a Viking funeral, well, that is the moment where he is confronted by Hela. And when it comes to Hela, she tells Thor, listen, the reason why your arm was so easily broken earlier is because I cast a spell on you. And that spell was to make you more mortal than you ever were before. And so now you, my dear friend Thor, can get hurt very easily. Now you could think the reason why she did this is because she wants to kill off Thor. But in reality, that is not the case. She wants to have Thor suffer and beg for death because she says, oh, I made sure that you cannot die. So no matter what, if you broke a leg, an arm, or a rib, you cannot die. You will just continue on with your broken bones and they'll heal back up. But again, they'll be broken again down the road. But you can never die. I want to make you beg for death. And so Thor goes on with the Viking funeral, but now he realized he has to be more careful. And so getting into the next chapter, we do pick up with Uncanny X-Men number 212. Now, this is the book where you have Wolverine and Sabertooth fight for the first time ever in Marvel Comics. This was their first battle in comic history. Now, with that being said, while you have Wolverine currently in the Morlock tunnels trying to find a Marauder to bring back over to the mansion so that the X-Men will be able to interrogate that Marauder, you have Wolverine also down with the idea of killing off the rest of the team of the Marauders after he is able to get the one he needs to interrogate. Now, while going through the tunnels and finding many more dead bodies, he's also contacted by Psylocke. Now, when it comes to Psylocke, of course, the reason why she is contacting Wolverine through his mind is to get a report. Storm wants to know if Wolverine was able to find a Marauder to bring back to interrogate. Now, you do have Wolverine say no, but at the same time, he also tells Psylocke to tell Storm and the others that when he's down here, he's going to make sure the Marauders pay for what they have done to all these innocent Morlocks. And then the call ends on that note right there. But getting back over to the mansion, we do get reminded that the X-Men were able to grab survivors and bring them back over to the mansion. Very similar to what X-Factor did with their survivors. They took their survivors back over to their base. And when it came to the X-Men, back to their base. Now, at the X-Mansion, you also have Mutant Massacre there, who is trying her best to play doctor and save the lives of survivors of the Morlocks. Unfortunately, they're dying off left and right. And the reason why? One, the X-Men and Mutant Massacre do not have the proper equipment to save lives. But two, a lot of the Morlocks' injuries were very severe, and so unfortunately, without the right equipment and the right kinds of doctors, these survivors are just dying off left and right. It's very grim. Now, when it comes to Storm, she's very upset with what she is seeing. Now, this was Chris Claremont doing a thing around this time where Storm lost her powers, but also she felt like she was no longer a great leader, that she was a failure. She put a lot of pressure on herself, and with the idea of Nightcrawler not being healed up right now, Kitty Pryde not being able to stop phasing, and also Colossus injuries and Rogue's injuries, she feels like she is a failure as the leader of the X-Men. But also because the Morlocks got seriously injured as well, and she was also their leader around this time as well. And so you have her just walk away very upset. Now, you do have Colossus wanting to follow her to make sure that she is okay. But unfortunately, when it comes to Colossus, he was unable to follow Storm. And so he stopped by Psylocke's room to ask for her help, to use her powers as a way to kind of locate Storm. Unfortunately, Colossus was also seriously injured in the earlier chapters of this event. And those injuries are now playing a part when it comes to Colossus' health, because he just collapses right on top of Psylocke. Now, with him being in his armor form, he is very heavy and hard to move. And so Psylocke has no choice but to go ahead and call out for Rogue, who around this time had super strength, thanks to her absorbing Miss Marvel's powers. And so she was able to fly over and remove Colossus off the top of the body of Psylocke. But now you have the X-Men very worried about Colossus, because his injuries are now taking a turn to the worst when it comes to him surviving. But getting back over to Wolverine just real quickly, you have Wolverine realize that X-Factor had also been in the tunnels as well. Now, we have to remember, when it came to X-Factor, like I said earlier, their main goal was to make sure that Charles Xavier's dream came to life. But what they also did was they pretended to be a group of people who would go out of their way to hunt down mutants and lock them up. Now, in reality, that was not true. That in reality, when it came to X-Factor, their goal was to help mutants get into better situations for their lives. And so when it came to Wolverine, he heard recent news about X-Factor being the original X-Men. He's kind of like, why in the world is the original X-Men going after their fellow mutants? Now, while he's going to the tunnels, he also picks up the scent of Jean Grey, and he realized that, oh my God, Jean Grey is alive. The new X-Men team have no idea that she is alive again. And so for Wolverine, this is the first moment he realized that she is alive. But getting back over to the X-Men, they're still trying to save the life of Colossus. The problem is, though, Colossus is in his metal form, and with him not being awake, he is unable to turn it off, which makes it hard for the X-Men to figure out what kind of injuries Colossus has. They have a hard time reading on what they can do to actually save his life. Now that is when Magneto steps in, because when Colossus is in his armor form, it's just a metal skin. And so Magneto is able to control metal. And so what Magneto is going to do is use his powers, but also the magnetic field of the earth to kind of help him learn what kind of injuries Colossus has, but at the same time try to repair those injuries. Because again, Colossus is in his metal form, and Magneto should be able to bend the metal of Colossus, like his actual skin, to repair his body. Except once he's done doing all of that, well, Colossus wakes up happy and feels somewhat better. But the reason why he feels better, because he cannot feel the pain of his body. And the reason why? Because now he is paralyzed. Something went wrong when it came to Magneto trying to use his powers to fix Colossus. Now we do jump back over to Storm, and with Storm, it's really more the idea of she's scared to be a leader of the X-Men, but also she is the leader of the Morlocks as well. Because we have to remember, in the earlier chapters of X-Men comics, when Storm first appeared, she actually fought against Callisto, and Callisto was the original leader of the Morlocks. Except you have the two characters fight against each other, Storm won, and Storm became the leader of both groups, except Storm says, I will be with the X-Men more often than with the Morlocks. And so she left Callisto in charge as long as she is away. Either way, you have Callisto trying to chase down Storm, because she realized that Storm is beginning to doubt herself as a leader, not just for the X-Men, but also for the Morlocks as well. And so you have Callisto say, you just can't rabbit your way out of this. Other words, meaning that you just can't ditch all your problems because things got too tough. Listen, that's life, but also that's life as a leader. You're going to have more problems than other people. But the thing is, I realize you are a great leader, and I feel like the only reason why you're so scared is because you had currently lost your powers. And that's the thing. You don't need your powers to be a great leader. It's your actions that show other people why you are a great leader. And so once you have Callisto being able to talk to Storm, you have Storm kind of realize that Callisto is most likely right. But getting back over to Wolverine, you have Wolverine being able to find Sabertooth. Now, like I said earlier, this is the first time these two characters had ever fought against each other in Marvel Comics. Not in the actual main Marvel Universe timeline, I'm saying in the real world. This was the first book that fans picked up and said, oh my God, it's cool to see Wolverine and Sabertooth fight against each other. But on top of that, you had Sabertooth hint at the idea that these two characters know each other very well. They have a long history with one another. Now, this is also the moment where you have Sabertooth tell Wolverine and us, the readers, that they were sent there by their leader. The Marauders were sent there by Mr. Sinister, and that is it. And then you have the two characters fight against each other. Now, Wolverine realized that Sabertooth had a hostage, and that would be the healer. And so you have Wolverine realize he has to get rid of Sabertooth to save the life of Healer. And so what Wolverine does, he realized the area they're in right now has a very weak support system that keeps up the ceiling from collapsing on top of them. And so once you have Wolverine get rid of those support system that are above them, well, the entire roof caves in right on top of Sabertooth, which gives Wolverine the chance to grab Healer and get the heck out of there. Now, we were told back in the New Mutant chapter that there is a tunnel of the Morlock tunnels that lead back over to the X Mansion. And matter of fact, you have Wolverine take that tunnel to get back over to the X-Men with the Healer in his arms. Now, here's the thing, because as soon as Wolverine arrives, he tells Rogue that he had picked up the sense of the New Mutants. And remember, in their chapter, they went into the city using the Morlock tunnels to find their missing teammates, but they missed every single member of the Marauders, and so they got very lucky. Except for the X-Men, they believe the New Mutants are currently possibly in the tunnels of the Morlocks, facing other members of the Morlocks, or the Marauders, sorry. Now, as soon as Wolverine arrives at the tail end of the tunnel to hand Healer over to Rogue, that is when Rogue realized there is some kind of energy blast about to hit them in the tunnel. And so she was able to grab Wolverine and Healer and get far back enough so that they would not be hit by the blast. But the tunnel does cave in. And so if the New Mutants or the X-Men are still in the Morlock tunnels, they don't have a way back home right now. They have to find a different way home. But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.